How silly. I had my no, this is for my friends who aren't going to be here. You've missed introduction. I'm really sorry. I'm not doing that again. This is why when I do my open mic, it just records from the beginning to the end, because when I put it on pause, I turn around later and go, oh no. And I haven't started it up again. So introduction is we're all going to read bits. We're going to share. We're going to talk about ecofeminism, which is a theme from York International Women's Week. And I guess that's it. Excuse me. Olive oil. I had spicy olive oil and it's fighting back. All right. Yeah, I've decided to just go alphabetically, I think. Why not? Eliza Mood, and this is weighted heavily to Stairwell Books authors, which is why I'm really happy that Kenzie is here from Fly on the Wall Press, an amazing little press. I love it. I love it. And I don't even want to say little, they're our size now. We're medium, small presses. And if Lydia joins us, she'll be representing another press too, because I didn't want it to just be in-house. I just didn't open for all of us. So Eliza sent me a book, a manuscript a while ago, and I was really struck by it. And so Eliza, talk to us about your book and your story and your inspiration, and read us some, and that's it. And I'm really glad that you're here tonight. And you're on mute. We're going to do this forever.
Oh, sorry. I just assumed because I could hear you, you could hear me, which doesn't work. It's not the thing. Well, my book takes place on the coast of Hartlepool, and it's after sea level rise. So it's in the very near future, which I wanted to use because we're all here now. It's happening now. If it's not happening just in this spot, wildfires or drought or floods are happening somewhere. And I wanted it to be ordinary people who'd been pushed out of their everyday, and migrants and people, a person who fits into the topic that we've chosen, who's a sort of would like to be despotic if he had somebody to control, and has an attitude that's built up from his past. And if the question is, how do these people making their myths about colonization, empire, settlement, whatever history or unhistory, or who their own history invented or myth made, wherever it comes from, such as Putin, such as this particular character, if we're going to look at how do we alter the course of things as women or as people in general, then it's as many voices as possible that aren't heard. So I've got two people whose voices are suppressed for different reasons. And he, because of a slight knock on the head, regresses to his childhood, which is actually a childhood in a labor camp in the Soviet Union. And I wanted that because I wanted to say, well, we are creating these people by doing what we do, however slowly and however sort of shutting eyes and colluding or being complicit from other parts of the world, or how whatever is going on, these people are allowed to grow, because we just don't believe, we haven't got the imagination perhaps to realize that they'll do what they actually do. So I wanted to look at a little bit of the past of Volkov, and also Alma, who grows to have a voice in here, who Volk has brought under false pretenses to Hartlepool shore. So I start with Alma's mother. My mother says, your father's friend, Volkov, is a rich man now and born again. He'll get you the papers you need. Write and tell us where you are. This man is to take me to England and send me to school there. My mother's face rucks into furrows and hollows, but a fire has been burning in her since she and Ron began documenting mosses as the permafrost thaws. We have to do this, Alma. You understand? There's secret knowledge stored in our language and the language of the other tribes, knowledge of reindeer, wolves, trees, moss and ice. Unless we can salvage and share it, it'll die with the languages of the tundra and the taiga, even though it might hold a key to the earth's heartbeat. This is bigger than any of us. She takes my hands. It's a race against time. You see that, don't you? To see if we can turn back the clock. And then Volk, she relates this is part of their journey, part of their traveling to England, where we've gone back to the past. When I wake, Volk is standing over me and the snow leopard has gone. We fly west and north into the Urals, where ripe gems drop as apples. Other corporations are paused, though armed with the facts and the truth, Volk will move first. He brings me to the ice chambers of the Kungur, and I lose him as he prays for heavenly guidance in sniffing out the providential, the miraculous among mineral deposits. His probings are blessed. His prosperity, the wealth that will never suffice, attests to this. I wander through gypsum tunnels, find and lose myself in glass-blown forests. In a sepulchre of ice, I lie down to rest or leave this world. And she moves on. At each place, they tell me the freeze is later and the thaw earlier than ever. Thaw and refreeze in winter, and black ice forms and reindeer hooves split as they paw at a glass-sharp pane to reach moss. They break the ice or starve. Each time I write to my mother, we move on before I can receive a reply. Or he is binning them. Volk barks at his men to cover an oil spill with sand, bribes inhabitants with snowmobiles and portable generators, curses and threatens if they do not sign papers written in a language they cannot read. Knowing that the government has already granted the license anyway, they sign away lands they fish and hunt, only for the rivers to be oil slicked and reindeer moss spiked with poison. In the Arctic North, we visit mines and industrial towns. It is as though he is searching for something, always beyond his grasp, as though the earth is alive and he must kill her or she him. Here, his men are on a platform drilling, testing for gases, carbon dioxide, methane. There, he inspects mysterious craters forming where the permafrost is melting. One is Batagaika. So huge, they call it the gateway to the underworld. Men mutter in hushed tones, believing this may threaten installations, negotiation of deals, plans for new plants, share prices. Are the craters the results of explosions of methane or some gas? Some say they are caused by thermochast activity. Don't they have the imprint of God's thumb? A sign he is pointing to and opening up new wells. We fly to an ice-breaking tanker docked at Sabetta, the new Arctic port on the Yamal. This is the future, Volk says. Though the ice is thinner and younger, this shortcut between Hamburg and Shanghai is, for most ships, still only passable with a nuclear icebreaker escort. Yet the signs are clear. The Lord will force locks so that Volk, pioneer, can bring forth his treasures. Still, one thing is nagging me, will not rest. Frozen under the ice at Colma, he was searching for more than minerals. In some small town, he ran out as a storm raged and brought back skulls washed out of shallow graves. A woman laughed, a grim laugh. These are the bones of the swineherds of fairy tale, she told me, muttering, of slaves, the exiles of the north. And Volk was one of those. And I think I've read enough, but there's one tiny little bit that I was going to just to show. He was in love with a girl in the Labour camp, and it's just very short. Kopeka turns to Volk, face slicked with toxic makeup. Cheeks white, lids yellow, lips a deathly green, intense against the grey of her pea coat. Addicted to the harsh rasp of carcinogens, they suck contaminated waters, taste the sweetness of copper and bitter nickel, breathe a smog of sulfides and blue fog, and wash in acid rain. One night they pull fish from the bloody river with makeshift rod and line. Both relish the bitterness of metals on the tongue, the seeps and smears of colour that stain and soil water here. The startling streaks of flame in snow, copper oxide, sulfides, sulfates. These oranges, reds, greens, blues, yellows, leached from the mine, are smeared along the banks of streams. After the aurora borealis, these are, they believe, true beauty. But when Kopeka rolls up her sleeves, her arms are flowering with purple bruises, and she is trying to ask a question. It is the work of a moment to pull down her trousers. There is red blood on her thighs. It is over in a few moments. I forgive you, Volk. I forgive you.
Thank you, Eliza. That's interesting. The whole book is a way about, it is sort of about myth making or finding new myths or remembering myths. And you're right. Part of it is Volk creating his own myth, isn't it?
Yes, that's the way I saw it. Yeah. And the incredible thing is that everything I hear about Putin, he has and is doing the same thing. But fascinatingly, I had a look at the Faber Book of Utopias, which so often switch into dystopia very easily. And I noticed how Ukraine was colonized in a rather interesting book that you will all know about, and probably know about this anyway, and that they've undertaken the construction of roads in this utopia that will lead to the southernmost point of the Crimea. The roads will be studded with German towns, and around these towns our colonists will settle. In 100 years, the country will be one of the loveliest gardens in the world. We shan't settle in the Russian towns, and we'll let them fall to pieces without intervening. The Slav people are not destined to live a cleanly life. They know it, and we would be wrong to persuade them to the contrary. And it goes on about Crimea. The Black Sea will give wealth to our fishermen, and all of the stuff. I think we ought to build spaghetti factories on the spot. All the prerequisites are there. We'll become the most self-supporting state. And to handle it all, the whole strength of the entire German manpower. Sorry, it's making me feel emotional. My God, how right the peasant is to put his trust solely in the earth.
Wow.
Mein Kampf.
Oh my goodness. Ooh. Yeah, that fits right in with what's going on right now. Della, yes, what would you want to put something in?
I did not catch the phrase before, gateway to the underworld. And I wonder if you could tell me if you were referring to a particular place that's supposedly a gateway.
Well, yes, it's appeared. It's a massive kind of thermocast opening, which has been caused by uprising gases, methane, and all sorts. But it's become huge, vast, much bigger than the other escaping methane holes and other greenhouse gas holes. And the phrase before, it was just saying that the name is Batagaika, sorry, Batagaita.
Is it a real place?
It's an actual crater formed by gases escaping from the permafrost.
Oh, that's horrible. Susie.
I'm fascinated. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. That is.
I just wanted to say that I've read your book, Eliza, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, the writing is just astonishing. But aside from that, just thinking about it on this issue, I just thought the fact that it was set in Hartlepool was really, really powerful. I was just thinking about all of this stuff around climate change and the amount of apathy that we've got, and how we other people. This is stuff that happens everywhere but here, to anybody else but here. And I think it's one of the things that fiction can do really well, is to kind of harbour this kind of feelings of empathy and to bring it closer to home. And so I thought that, but also, is it Alma? I think it was Alma. And I know I did a review of your book, and I think I mentioned.
Thank you. I was thrilled. Thank you.
It was. I absolutely loved that character. She had ancestry of Mongol herders. Is it?
Yes. Yes.
And just her backstory was just so beautifully done. And I just, again, thought it was a really powerful thing to have that marginalized voice really brought to the fore, because what you were saying before, Rose, I mean, all of this stuff is massively hitting people most, socioeconomically worse off. And Indigenous people, tribal people, people living close to the land, they're the worst hit. And so having their voices, raised up, I just wanted to say that. I thought it was a great book, and I absolutely adored that character.
Oh, I do love Alma. Yeah. Pauline, did you have your hand up? I've had to put everyone back on gallery view so I can see all the hands. Otherwise, I was missing them. Oh, and then Della's, I see your hand up too.
Yeah, I wanted to follow on the point about the meter in holes, and the way in which men particularly, but mankind, will make money out of even things that are clearly wrong and dangerous and all the rest of it. There was a program on TV about the mammoth hunters who are investigating the caves that are opening up through Cave. And they are selling the mammoth bones, the mammoth relics that they are finding. And there is this feverish activity at the moment around some of the lakes in the far north, the tundra area, where thaw is occurring, to get out the mammoth relics, as it were, and sell them. And you think, well, doesn't it occur to you that this is a terrible situation? You're busy making money out of it. And why is it, like your Vault character, and there's a sense in which people will not act to improve things because they make money out of even the disaster.
I think that they figure, I think these cynical people are thinking to themselves, I've got mine, and they don't really even care about their own grandchildren. I think they figure they figure there is nothing after death, and why not just have a good time now? And if they hate me, I won't know, And I think they just care nothing about it. They just really do not. Oh, Lydia, good. Lydia's joining us. Della, did you have your hand up again? And then I see Kenzie's is up. If not, I'm just going to go on and see what you got to say, Kenzie, and then I'm going to go on to the next reader, which, let me see. I was having it in alphabetical order, and I've lost my place. That would be Kenzie anyway. Ha ha ha. Okay, so Kenzie, yes. What do you want to say or mention and stuff?
Yeah, just to add to what you were saying about obviously kind of people not caring about even their own grandchildren, and I think a big excuse I see a lot is, oh well, someone's going to do it, someone's going to go and make the money out of it, so I may as well, and I think that's such an interesting kind of way of looking at things. It's like, actually if we all pull together, maybe these things wouldn't happen, but someone's got an excuse where, oh, I'll go because someone else is going to do it first, otherwise if I don't get there first.
That, and also the reliance and the presumption that, well, science is going to sort it anyway. There's going to be some big vacuum cleaner being made in Norway right about now. It's just going to suck everything bad back out. Eliza, thank you so much for that reading. It's got us all thinking about it. And I do adore that book. All right. Lydia, have you joined us? What I had the clever idea of having everyone do is read in alphabetical order, because I just couldn't be asked to try and figure out more. So that would be Eliza, and then Kenzie, and then you, if you're up for it, and then Pauline, and then Susie.
Sure, no problem. Sorry I'm so late.
that's
I've just had a bit of a mad moment. I was sat with my curry with my husband, and I said, "I'll just check what time this event starts. I'm sure it's 8 o'clock." And I was like, "Oh, no!" So I ran upstairs. So apologies. I'm going to be eating my tea while I listen to all you lovely people. But
That's perfectly fine. And I am recording it. And so because there's people who can't get here and had wanted to, I'm
Sure.
going to send it to like my friend Muriel, who's got tinies, and she wanted to catch it's bedtime for tiny people, and a few other people that just had things going on at this exact same time. So it won't be widely broadcast. And if you want to have a copy of your reading, I'm more than happy to send it to you. Absolutely. And you can catch up with Eliza's reading, which is magnificent, actually, and a good discussion.
no, I'd love to.
So next up is Kenzie Millar, and Kenzie is published by Isabel Kenyon's Fly on the Wall Press. And I described Fly as a small press, but it's not really. It's like a medium small, because she does about the number of books we do now, and has about 100 titles out like we do now, and has been going for a while. And Bella's just amazing, really. And thanks to her, I've read your work already, Kenzie. And so I would love to have you join us and say a little bit about yourself or your reading or what it is. I'm really interested to hear.
Yeah, so I'm mainly a short story writer, and obviously, kind of was thinking about different stories that could kind of fit this event. And I think the idea of dystopian women really reached out to me anyway, because I love writing women characters who are great, morally grey. Because I think it's great to have powerful women out there and be able to see them, but also it's important to have bad guys that are women too. I think we've been so long, siloed into, you can be the side character, the love interest. It's great to get some good female villains in there too, and I like exploring the kind of morally grey aspects of stuff. So that this story kind of does that, and definitely gets you questioning, hopefully, who is right and who is wrong, and hopefully you'll kind of enjoy that. I think how this really ties in as well to what we were just discussing is the commodification of the environment and of people, and talking about that. This story kind of looks into that as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. It's called Girl Lost. There are 2 windows in my room. One faces east and one west. My favourite is the one to the west. I have my big lumpy chair next to it, a blanket I crocheted. I like to watch the sun setting, the sky surprising me every evening with the colours it chooses. Red sky at night, that's too simple. It's reds and oranges and pinks, purple storms and silver clouds. I'd love to paint the sky, but it would never look bright. That's why I get so frustrated by my projects. In my mind's eye, they are gloriously creative, a window into my soul, but instead they're just a jumble of wool, or paint splashes, or cardboard shreds. My blanket is at least practical, and it is very soft, good quality wool. I like the west-facing window because I can sit there and see the end of another day. I score a line on the wall, growing my tally chart, my forest of days. Another day done surely means a day closer to getting out of here. Yes, my round room is large enough, and the cupboard of supplies for painting or making is well stocked. And yes, there are 2 windows, one facing east and one west, but there is something missing. There is no door. The girl is doing better, he says to the doctor. She has fewer tantrums now. The doctor nods and writes this on her clipboard. The medication must be helping, and perhaps she's more used to her surroundings. She's well supplied. Of course, the man nods furiously. I'm still unsure of your choice of materials, the doctor says. The cardboard with the paint which is flammable. There are no matches, nothing that could ignite a fire. But still, the doctor doesn't need to say more. The man knows what she means by her frown. We watch her. I learned how to make dream catchers when I was 8. I liked winding the threads around, creating a spider web. It made me think of Charlotte's web, how Charlotte protected and loved Wilbur. That was what these dream catchers were to me: protection, love, someone to watch out for me. Even at that young age, I knew there was a difference between those who would watch out for me and those who would watch me. As I read stories of caring parents, brothers who sheltered their younger siblings, even kings who kept their kingdoms safe, I knew this was not what I had. I had a soft bed, I had my books, I had warmth and food, but I did not have someone to watch over me. I know I must have parents somewhere. I also know that they must have allowed me to be brought here. This round room, this room that overlooked green trees and the passing of the seasons. They did not protect me from this room, my prison. When I was younger, I drew pictures of the families I read about in books. Those pictures are gone now, torn up in a fit of rage. I get so angry sometimes I can't control myself, and I tear and rip like a wild animal. It doesn't seem to matter. No matter how many sheets and cushions I destroy, I always find new ones in my cupboard, exactly alike. Now I make dream catchers to watch over me, and for me to watch in the breeze. I don't have family, not like in my books. I've been here too long to think of a rescue from outside my window. Somehow I must either accept or escape this room, this cage. And so I wind the thread, creating a web and thinking. Sometimes my art projects are no longer stored in the cupboard when I go to look for them. Someone or something must take them. Someone must bring me supplies. If they can get in, there must be a way out. Winding the thread, different colours, feathers to flutter in the breeze, my only taste of outside. Perhaps she is no longer a danger to herself, but that doesn't mean she is not dangerous. The man feels he's discussed this with his superiors thousands of times. Over the years, there have been different people for him to make his justifications to. Now there is a board, 5 people, 2 men, 2 women, and of course the doctor. She is on his side, he thinks. Generally, they agree about the girl. The panel look at him. He squirms in his chair and hopes his sweat isn't showing through his shirt. He has always been an inordinately sweaty man. Indeed, one man says eventually, and the gallery is doing well. He can't even remember this one's name. He hasn't bothered remembering their names for years. Too many changes of personnel and rearranging of structure. Bureaucracy, even for this. We have to make sure the stakeholders understand why we do as we do. Your project expends a lot of capital, a blonde woman says to him. She looks at him as if she has asked a question. He glances at the doctor, who he thinks rolls her eyes discreetly. We make a lot of money too, from the gallery. And there is the public safety to consider. I'm not sure you can, well, put a price on that. The blonde nods at him. Of course. Someone told me when I was younger that red and orange aren't good colours for little girls to like. They used to be my favourites. I still love the burning orange of the sky, but secretly, they can't watch my thoughts. At least I don't think they can. Who was it who told me I shouldn't like red so much? That I shouldn't like the feel of fire on my cheek so much? That I shouldn't like the taste of smoke on my tongue? It isn't good for little girls to like those things. Little girls should like making things. They should like painting things. That will be good for you, they told me. I imagine it as a woman's voice. I might have made this up. But a woman seems like the person who would tell me this. My mother, maybe. And then I started painting and crocheting. I even made some things from clay, although I didn't like how sticky it made my fingers. I don't paint the fires I see. I don't paint the buildings buckling under smoke and flame. I don't want them to see what is in my head, that uncontrollable beauty. I sit in my chair and look out of my window at the forest and picture it burning. I can taste the wood smoke. I can hear the crackling of each twig and each branch giving way to the flame. The gallery is busy again tonight. It usually is. He notices that there are lots of people interested in the collection of dream catchers. He should provide the girl with more wool. The colour combinations are amazing. He uses a lot of blues and purples. Lilac seems to be a favourite of hers, more appropriate than what she used to paint with. It is her early work that he refuses to sell. The paintings of the fires, the ones he doesn't know if she remembers. Her art is so different now, she can't possibly remember. And that is good for her. She has a clean mind now. She's free from that burden, from the guilt. He motions to one of the wait staff to take some drinks to the crowd by the dream catchers. Keep them in. Give them some booze to loosen their wallets. Keep the stakeholders happy. He walks around again, making sure there is a buzz in all 3 of the gallery's rooms. People keep their discussions to hushed tones, but he enjoys that they have things to talk about. The paintings always give people pause, thought. There's more to them than first meets the eye. One of his particular favourites at the moment is what they would call abstract. Harsh splashes of black against white, a little like those ink spots psychologists used at one point. It's only when you've been looking at it for a few minutes that you begin to see that the black is a fire, flames licking the white sky. Some people don't ever see this. I wake up in a sweat, despite having kicked the blankets off the bed. My dreams were of them again. I could never hear the individual voices, just screams and wails, howls against the night and the smell of smoke. I have always had these dreams, as long as I've been in this room, which by my count is a jungle's worth of days. There is barely any room on the walls for me to keep my count. I pick the blankets up from the floor and lie again, trying to take deep breaths. I calm myself from my anger by breathing deeply, and it helps after the dream. I breathe in the smell of smoke again, allowing it to warm my body like the sun through my window. These should be nightmares. Screams in the dark. My books talk about these as nightmares. Children are told not to fear the dark. There are no monsters under the bed. The thing that goes bump in the night, that's just the wind. That's what the parent or the kindly teacher tells the child. The screams make me up, but they don't scare me. I wake up smiling, feeling a blossoming joy deep inside me. I get more from these dreams than anything else. These are what keep me going. They are what I weave within my dream catchers so that they will never, ever leave me. He finishes his survey of the gallery where he always does, the beginning. This room is where guests are told to start, but he prefers to end here. Of course, he already knows her story and knows how her art began. Still, looking gives him a shiver every time. Little Girl Lost, they titled this exhibit. The mix of photographs and her early paintings, as well some brief descriptions of her life, her crimes, the reasons they must continue to watch her. People gasp as they read, shudder at the photographs. They are supposed to shock. Shock leads to sales. People are not made uncomfortable by viewing the burnt bodies. They are drawn in. That is human nature. This is art, after all. It is acceptable. Most of the others are black and white, with the flames of fires picked out in colour. Buildings gradually catching alight, some so far gone they are unrecognisable. One of the girl herself, her back to the camera as she watches the fire growing. She is small, and it is here people stand with their mouths agape. A child, he hears a woman whisper, painted these and did this. A prodigy, says the man, a genius. His favourite is the one in colour, the line of children lying in the foreground, the embers still glowing behind them. Some, but not all, are covered by sheets. The photographer was close enough for you to see the details, the different levels of burns on the ones that are uncovered, open to the air. It is this contrast he enjoys. This was true art. Thank you very much for listening to my story.
Wow. Wow, it's interesting. I haven't decided who the bad guy is. I don't think it's her. I think she's disturbed. I think they keep her there. Well done, Kenzie.
Thank you.
Yes. Maybe we should take her to Russia. Take her to the Kremlin. What was the impetus for that story, or did it just come to you fully formed?
I really wanted to write a retelling of Rapunzel and fairy tales, and I like a kind of a twist on that. And I guess I kind of started thinking about, you know, in a future world rather than the kind of fairy tale is usually historical. Why would someone be kept in one place in one room? And, you know, that then led to the idea of actually using this girl because they were making money off her. And actually possibly at the beginning they were imprisoning her for good reasons and to kind of rehabilitate her perhaps. And then they realized actually they could make more money off keeping her the way she was.
Yeah, it's hinted that she can just make these fires. It's not like she's setting them. I think she's making them, isn't she?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, big. Oh, that is interesting. In a way, she has power, but in a way, she has none. So in a way, when a woman is strong or uncontrollable, we are contained, aren't we?
Exactly, and I think it's that element of power that is something that they kind of realize, you know, they can channel in a certain way, which is something we often get, you know, we can act in a certain way as long as it benefits the system and benefits the patriarchal system, you know, but as soon as we want to use our power in a different way that changes and challenges that, then it's not so great and they're not so happy with that.
No, that's amazing. I'm gonna throw the floor open. Does anyone have their hand up or wants to comment?
Well, Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. Just blurt. I love it. It's fine.
It's also about art and literature and all of the arts, and how much truer and it can be, like fiction, than the fake news and than what is put about as reality, as in the myth-making thing that we were talking about, because actually the truth lies in the drawings where the shadow drawing is actually the flames, which is the real thing, the truth that's hidden there if you look long enough. And it's a really powerful story, and also a sort of Lady of Shalott kind of connection, not rescued by anyone or riding by, but the sort of reflections into herself are the most important and are the key things about the story. And yeah.
Pauline, did you want to say something? You're on mute, darling.
One of the things that troubles me is that throughout history, in times of war, artists and writers have always been top of the hit list. Virginia Woolf, for instance, one of the reasons for her suicide during the Second World War was that she found out that she and Leonard were both on the top of the Nazi hit list, and she was very afraid that Britain was about to be invaded. And that had fed into the moment she committed suicide, the timing. I'm often aware that I'm probably on a hit list somewhere, and it's a rather uneasy feeling because I've never sort of held my peace, perhaps, when I should have done. But I think we probably all, we have a vested interest in preventing dictatorial governments because
Yes.
we are threatened by them as artists and writers.
Oh, we are, and we're threatened by the ones that are currently here in the UK, and we're threatened by the one that wants to try to get back into power in America. And it's just the authoritarian regimes are around us at this point in time. I mean, they really are. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I did not know that about. That's why Virginia Woolf, or that's one of the
Part of the reason.
part of it. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm sure I'm on a list too. I used to hear the phone click when Bush was in power.
Yes, I had a friend who once heard chairs shifting behind as if they were changing over who was listening to the phone.
Oh dear. Oh, Susie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just making rambling comments now because I just felt my blood pressure rise. I agree, Eliza, that fiction can make more sense than fake news, and we get a lot of fake news, but also just thinking about women and what you were saying, Pauline, about the hit list and you know, as soon as we sort of speak out and misbehave, we get punished. And you can talk about that on a sort of a big level of going up against a tyrannical regime. But I think we have that on a daily basis, lower level, smaller scale. And, you know, we earned the right to, we got the right to vote. We fought for the right to vote. And, but hell, if you try and use that right to vote with your own free thought, hell, if you try and sit at a dinner table with men who think that they are the head of the dinner table, even when it's your dinner table. And I've had this so many times, and you declare your own political opinion and you get lambasted and shouted down, and it ends up in a row. And it's, you know, we fought for the right to vote. That doesn't mean that we have to vote like you do. We can vote like we do, and this stuff is going on now. And just when everybody was talking, just thinking about, you know, free thinking women were burnt at the stake. We're still burning free women at the stake, just in different ways. And I've certainly can think of countless examples in my life where I you know, come up against it because I just don't agree, because actually it's patriarchy. And it's patriarchy on a family level and on a very personal level to government level. the whole thing, you know, the systems don't work. Politics is designed by men for men. It was never designed for women. It doesn't work for women. None of this stuff works for women. We actually just need a revolution. But yeah, just listening to what everybody's saying, and it's like, yeah, we just, you know, this is stuff that is impacting us all every day, from the big stuff to the really small stuff, and we are just constantly getting these messages that we are being, you know, we are constantly being put in our place. And feeling, and I can feel my own level of anger rising just as I'm talking, because this is just, it's just endemic everywhere, and this is what young women are facing now. And I think things are getting more polarized as well, and I don't know if that's because of social media partly, or, but I think that I look at young women now, 18, 19, 20-year-old women, younger, older, and just think, God, I think you're gonna, this is tough. This is really, really tough to be a free thinking woman who's got your own ideas, your own thoughts, and just having that voice in the world, which is why International Women's Day is so great. But yeah, I'm rambling now.
Agreed. Not with your rambling, with what you said.
Definitely. Tanya, my dear, you've had your hand up. I think sometimes the hands stay up until you click them back down again, which is why I kept calling on Della. I think you have to put it back down, but I'm not sure. I'm an experiment. But so ignore my hand up. But you can talk, Pauline. Tanya, sorry. What is it, dear? No, I can't make the things go.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So many things. I just want to agree with everything that's been said. But just one little trivial thing. When we're a little girl, well, when girls are small, children, I remember my grandfather saying to me, obviously of a completely different generation, working class miner, you know, and he used to say to me, be good. Be good. I love you when you're good. And good meant quiet. And I used to have, you know, get very, very angry about many things and cry a lot and stuff, shout a lot, for various reasons. But I was just struck by that phrase, I love you when you're good. And what does good mean? Good meant don't speak. Good meant being still, being quiet, and not making a fuss. And we need to make a fuss. And I just want to say how incredible, I know it's the cliche, but I was thinking about Malala, and I was thinking about Greta Thunberg, and how they are very young women who are making a noise and being very public in a way that young men, some are making, but it's those two young women that have really, really made the statement. And that's an excellent thing. So I don't know, I'm just saying what everyone else has said, but
no, that's all right. We're here to say that, actually, which is nice to be heard, Tanya, and that we can exactly be heard. Yeah. Kenzie, was your hand up? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think it's something I'm really trying to be more conscious of, actually, of actually what we do say to children and young girls, and kind of what we compliment them on and things like that, because I think it is so easy to fall into those, gender, oh, aren't you pretty, and aren't you cute, and actually it's being really mindful of not telling a young girl that, oh, you're loved because you're good and you sit there so neatly, and your lovely handwriting and things, and it's going, actually, no, you need to use your voice, and sometimes that will involve you throwing a temper tantrum, and that's important because that's how it develops, and that's how they grow up to be, those inspiring young. I mean, Greta Thunberg, I think, is just the amount of adults that have bullied her, and yet she still continues to persevere in what she's, we were talking about obviously being on hit lists and things like that, and I think it's scary, isn't it, as an idea, as a concept, and yet there are these young women who will continue to raise their heads above the parapet and take these hits that these men are throwing at them and bullying them for their looks, their way of speaking, whatever it might be. And I think it is important for us to start that as young as possible, that to give girls that resilience to be able to speak out.
You know, the thing is, it's so internalized though. When I was teaching science at a small private school of grade 3 and grade 4, which roughly translates to year 3 and year 4 in England. It's a little off, but close enough, little kids. And it was a tiny school, only 14 kids in a class, and it was mixed. And you know what? For the first day, I was calling on the boys because they had their hands up and were going, oh, oh, oh. And I thought, bad feminist, bad, bad. And so starting the next day, I would call on, if a boy was going, oh, 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 like some kind of, you know, animal, boo, I would just call on a girl and I'd say, well, what do you think? And I didn't have my hand up. I said, that's great, you know, because if you knew, then you'd be teaching the class. You know, I may not know. I went out of my way to call on girls. I wouldn't call on anyone who was yelling and waving their hands in the air, particularly if they were a boy. Perhaps I called on girls who were doing that. I don't know. And by within a month or two, or shortly, a boy might be doing this, and a girl say, "I had my hand up first," and I was like, "Yes." And sometimes when you see a little tiny thing on the street, it is so tempting. We are internalizing the misogyny to go, aren't you cute? And if I catch myself in time, I'll say, you look like a smart one, you know, and I go out of my way to just go something like, aren't you the smarty pants? And look at you, how smart you are. And I try to keep the word pretty off my lips, but it is so tempting because they're all cute. If they're little tiny things, they're cute, but you know, oof, that is so, yes. Susie, and then we got to go on and hear something from Lydia Jenkins.
I just wanted to say one more thing. It's not just young people or young girls who are being bullied. I'm thinking of the case of Carol Cadwallader, who's taken to court personally, not the Guardian, but herself personally by Aaron Banks, who has vilified her in social media and pursued her. The court case that she had to go through was immense. So, I mean, she's a really important journalist. You know, she's not young. She knows how to stand up for herself. But even that in that case, it was just awful.
What happened? Because I've been only half watching the news and I don't.
She did a TED talk and she said something about Aaron Banks and connections to Russia and money.
Probably was correct as it turns out, but I digress.
And then he took her to court. He sued her personally, not the actual organization that she worked for. So he pursued her across. I don't know if you've ever seen anything on Twitter, but he was posting films and memes of her as the crazy cat lady. Every time she tweeted, he would do something vile in return.
Oh.
He really has been viciously bullying towards her. It was an awful court case.
Did she lose?
I don't think the verdict's out yet.
Oh, but he's not doing himself any favors by doing that, one would hope.
No, but she's back on Twitter now and proving right with everything that she said with Russian money. Yeah.
Good. Well, bad, but yes, good. All right. I'm mindful of the time. It's 7. All righty. Lydia Jenkins came across the International Women's Week and reached out to the other organizers and then got a hold of me somehow and then came to the open mic and I'm not even quite sure what the name of your publishing company is. It's Malcolm something. So please join us, Lydia. And I'm going to put myself on mute and then talk a bit about your book and stuff.
Cool, thanks, Rose. So I've published 2 dystopian novels through Malcolm Down Publishing, who are a small publishing house based in Stafford. Essentially, so this is the first one. It's called Crowned Worthy. The second one is called Stolen Crowns. Essentially, the series is about, I like to describe it as the working world on steroids. And essentially, it's a dystopian society where the working world has just gone absolutely mad. And it's a bit of a reflection on how I've personally felt as a person or a young person coming into the working world and just having all of this pressure laid onto you in terms of achieving, getting to your next goal, always feeling like you've got to do something productive. That's a massive sort of, almost that feeling of guilt is something that I've had to process massively, having to go through all the exam process through university and then going into the working world and always just feeling like you need to achieve. And I got made redundant, so in 2019. And it was a bit of a, oh, what do I do now? It was both an exciting time, but also a pretty daunting time in in the, well, what does this mean now? Where's my worth in if I don't actually have a job? And it just revealed to me, oh, actually, okay, our society is almost shaped on, our worth is based on what we achieve. And what would a society look like if that was absolutely out of control? And so that's what I've created. I created a world called Chulo, where everyone has what's called a merit score. And essentially everything that they do is tracked. It's similar to some of the concepts you might have seen in Netflix's Black Mirror series. Don't know if anyone's heard of that.
Yep.
It's similar to some of that. So a lot of technology, but I follow sort of the lives of ambitious young professionals. But one of these protagonists is a young girl called Jenny, and she's around 24 years old. So, sorry, I've just seen that from Rose in the chat. I was thinking about that the other day. Your work is your identity almost, isn't it? Because it's like, oh, what do you do? Rather than, oh, tell me about yourself, who you are. It's, what do you do for a living? I was thinking about exactly that the other day. But yes, so Jenny is about 24, and I've just loved sort of developing her character over the books. I'm currently writing the third one, and she's really starting to come into her own. I've even had sort of readers in the second book having comments like, yes, Jenny, like, come on, she's going for it, sort of thing. But the reading I'm going to do is from the first book, and the context is that she's meeting her father for lunch, and she's having to tell him about some stuff that's happening at work. So they're in a kind of fancy restaurant with drones flying all over the place, delivering food and all that. So that's a bit of the context. So I'll just dive into it. Jenny took a deep breath, listing reasons in her head why she loved her father. It was short. He's your father. However, it always managed to help her keep her cool. She was trying to drive the conversation from her side. She was trying to avoid any discussion of her job, her credit situation, or her merit score. She watched his aging, wise eyes move from herself to the menu on his screen. He quickly dismissed it with an over-exaggerated tap. I'm having the kale. Jenny didn't know what she wanted. Her head was beginning to sting a little, to meet nicely with the strange flipping of her stomach. Just have the kale too, but camel looks so good. Camel does real damage to the hips and waist. What she really wanted was a glass of water. Had a drone not realised they were here? He was Boris Mansfold for Chulo's sake. His privilege and status were another advantage of being his daughter. Yet here they clearly hadn't programmed the drones to recognise him. Wouldn't have this nonsense in the quarters. She eventually settled for the kale. So, how are the dressing table? Now there's an interesting thing. People love them in my changing rooms. He looked at her almost as if he was proud. Jenny felt sick. She'd have to tell him. It would eventually come out, especially if her average daily merit went down, which he probably already checked. A man of his calibre probably had the connections, so he could see everything. Her current location, activities, merit count, acquaintances. It wouldn't surprise her in the slightest. He probably even knew about her painting and all the sleep she had last night. Those thoughts made her feel even more unwell. She just had to say it. Just say it, quickly. I've been moved to fat reduction. Her nerves skyrocketed. Her father paused for a moment before speaking bluntly, laughter brewing in his tone. That computerized fat removal thing, the one with all the bad press. Jenny curled her tongue within her mouth, held her father's eye contact and nodded her head. She could feel the clamminess of her hands between her fingers, wiping them on the seat. Her father exploded into laughter. Jenny rolled her eyes, but not enough for him to see. She didn't want to lose face and let him know that she was embarrassed by it. Reaching in his pocket, her father found a handkerchief to dab his increasingly wet eyes. Jenny spotted the curly calligraphic BM on its corner. So pretentious, Jenny thought. but she did like its familiarity. She was reminded of all the tears it had once wiped away. "You're joking?" he asked. "Not joking." Jenny felt calmer. She needed to defend herself, if not for anything but her pride, even though the stabs of that headache were now forcefully making their way across her forehead. "What merit will that give you?" Her father was no longer laughing, and his eyes were no longer joyful. He stared at her with a terrifying persistence. "Credit will be enough, I'm sure, but you're not even at M450 yet. I was back in the glorified quarters by the time I was your age. Come on, girl. Breathe. Remember the list. He's your father." Jenny spoke calmly again. "Yes. At first I was sad to leave the tables, but that started out small. Remember everyone thought they'd flop?" Jenny thought back to all the bad press around having tech assistants to highlight your imperfections. "If we get this right, people losing weight in a fast but safe way will give them the confidence to become their more effective self. Their contribution could be higher than ever." Jenny was surprised that she could recite the marketing pitch and do it well. Perhaps she had paid enough attention in the briefing meetings. "Plus, it will decrease the sales of weight loss drugs downtown," she finished, smiling slightly and swallowing hard to moisten her increasingly dry throat. I think I'll leave it there. Yeah, so there you go.
Thank you. What was the so the impetus was basically you becoming redundant and thinking about how important work is. We have some comments. If you know how to save comments, do, and you'll see them. It's tempting to comment, but it gets distracting, so you don't want to lose track of what you were reading. But yeah, we were talking about how we are defined by work, so many of us, and we're defined by the lack of work, and we're defined by not having big enough jobs and all the rest of it. Yeah. So there's definitely that. Kenzie, you have your hand up also. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted. I really enjoyed that reading, and I think your novels show what I love so much about sort of dystopian fiction in general, of that kind of, you know, you're pushing things, but actually it's real life, you know, it's they're real
life
things
tweaked. Yes.
Yeah. You know, it's like a heavier vision, and that justification that she's having to do, even though, you know, she's not necessarily even happy with the decision herself, or that, you know, that she's had to move roles. She's still having to justify it to her father and create this list and use the marketing and things to kind of make that. And it you know, that's something that we all do day to day, and you know, something we have had to do. And I love the idea of a point system being like an outward way that everyone can see, because I think it's similar to salary and things, how people kind of go, oh, what, you know, what's your job title, and but that is such a you know, a numbered way of doing that. I mean, it would be such an easy system to be you know, held accountable to, and really push yourself to be like, oh, I need 5 more merit points. It's really interesting. I'd love to read the rest of the novel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's something that all of the characters have to process that, and they process it in very different ways. And as you were saying with that justification, I think Jenny starts to just try to justify it to herself. So she actually, this isn't a spoiler, but she loves to paint. She's a painter and she's really good at it, but there's not much merit in it. And it's dealing with the guilt of, she wants to paint and she wants to do that more, and she's trying to justify to herself why that is a meritless activity and why she shouldn't do it, but she just can't help herself. So because she loves it and it's creative and that's part of who she is. So yeah, it's just been so interesting in terms of when people have read my novels and sort of reviews, they've sort of said, this is scarily like real life. And people have resonated with some of the feelings that the characters have. Which, I mean, it came from my own feelings, so it has come from somewhere real. But yeah, I think it's interesting going back to sort of women and women in careers as well, is how far does that go in terms of, you know, the pressure on ourselves to achieve and be great leaders, and we absolutely should be great leaders. But there's even more pressure on women in that sense, I think.
Is it still that way? Because when I had Emily, we're back in 1990, and I was in a rather high pressure job, and I don't know, when someone is 6 months old and 9 months old, and every time you turn on, they're going to the doctor with an ear infection and the rest of it. And I had my boss look at me one day, goes, are you really cut out to be working full time? Maybe you should just be taking time off to be with your child if all she's doing is, I was a single mom, you know, I mean, definitely by the time she was 3, as a single mom. And we sold refrigerators and washers and dryers. So basically my job was predicated on people having enough people in the house to need more of these. So, you know, if it wasn't for, you know, families, we wouldn't be selling family size refrigerators, for goodness sake. And so I just kind of blinked at him in disbelief. But yeah, that's what it was in 90. So is it still that way? And anyone who's younger and is, you know, facing any sort of pressures, whether it's illness or someone or obligations of any sort, is it still a current thing? Kenzie, with your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's still a very real issue of, you know, of families and parenting and how does that work around careers. But I think another pressure is almost to that myth that you can do everything all at once. Yes. And, you know, you can be a CEO and raise all your children and not have to take any time off at the same time. And, you know, I think the kind of wanting to be role models in a working world is then also a pressure in a way as well, because, you know, are you succeeded enough to be a successful woman in that respect? And I think it comes back to that idea that the system just isn't, you know, we were saying that the political system isn't built for women, and neither is the world of work in a lot of sense. You know, capitalism is not was built by men and is for men and works very well for men. And we are trying to succeed within that system, and it doesn't necessarily work in the same way for us.
No, it doesn't. Susie Williamson.
I was just having a thought when, and I don't know what the answer is, but when you were all talking, so yeah, the system doesn't work for women to raise families, and also just, you know, menstruation, menopause and all the rest of it doesn't really work for any of our stuff. But also, just as you were talking about family and childcare responsibilities, and I just wondered whether, and I don't know the answer, is it purely because of that, or if a man was a single parent looking after children, would they receive the same treatment, or would it be viewed differently because they were a man? And so is it because it's seen as a you know, you're an inconvenience now because you've got to leave early to go and take your kid to the doctor, or is it just actually an excuse to oppress women? Is it just another excuse to oppress, belittle, and just vilify women? I don't know what the answer to that is. I was just wondering, when you were talking, Rose, if it was a single man in that situation, would they receive the same treatment, or would they be perhaps revered because look at what he's doing, he's raising?
Oh, probably. Oh, he's look at him. Oh, you know, his wife / left him / died / is ill / whatever, and look how brave he is. That's true. He would definitely, along those lines. Years and years ago, I read a book called Women the Hunter by Mary Beth Stange, and she's talking about if you're going to eat meat, hunt it, basically. But the whole first section of the book is a treatise on when gods were female, it was more egalitarianism, but when suddenly God became a male up in the sky and, you know, Moses brought tablets around, women were subjugated. And then she mentions that husbandry is the term for, you know, keeping crops and animals and women in place. And it made me, I wrote a book report about it, and talking about women who kill. And she must have, because in the report I did on it, I mentioned that women who kill, or there was a woman in the news at the time called Susan Smith, and she had drowned her children, and she blamed it on a black guy, which is even worse. I mean, just, you know, pick someone out of the blue and blame it on them. And of course, in America, they get 10 people shot. But anyway, she was on the news forever when it was discovered she drowned her children. It was the headlines, it was everywhere. But the same day she was in the news, on page 45 was a guy who had chased his children through a house with a knife and then killed them. But that was page 45. So when women kill, it's an even bigger deal, and we've upset the apple cart, the world order. But meanwhile, a guy was literally hunting his children in their house. She drugged the kids and drowned them. Not good, but not as bad as chasing them with a knife. And they were older too, so they knew what was going on. And so, but that was like, it was back there next to sports, which again, we'll never forget about, because, you know, sport. But yes, so it's all in we do what we're expected to do. We're not lauded for doing what a man would be lauded for, but Lordy, if we kill. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm just saying it's a bigger crime if we step outside of yet another norm. I will just never forget that. At the time I was reading this book and thinking about how to formulate this essay, it was article after article I then began to notice. Eliza.
Sorry. Oh gosh, it's sorry, it was I've been distracted by the fact that I had to put the wave on and I've forgotten what I was going to say. It was about going back. Yes, Pandora, that was it. I mean, it wasn't a box. It was a jar. It was a burial cairn. Ooh. And it released goods and evils. You know, in other words, she was made of clay. She was Eve, the Eve of her time, and she has been denigrated and despised and demoted, and actually she is nature, and she's the natural world, and she did the same. Oh, she had the same problem as Eve, of course. You know,
yes, it was knowledge, not sin, but never mind.
Yeah, but those. It's exactly what you said at the beginning of farming and, you know, Mesopotamia, things changed and we got, you know, two brothers, the brother who needs to have a wild brother because he's killing everybody in sight, the Gilgamesh, the warrior. So he's got to have a wild brother made out of clay who comes out of the forest, who will be his other half, his sort of female self, his self who's actually remembers that he's part of nature and can be compassionate, and he eventually corrupts the wild brother. So we've kind of, those myths tell us a lot. Gilgamesh, as wild brother Enkidu, eventually for Gilgamesh, for his brother, although he's advised his brother against it, he kills the spirit of the forest who protects the cedar forest, which is then raped and taken down to build the houses and to build the bridges and to build the everything that the Mesopotamians used, because they were now settled farmers. So we change our myths, don't we? And usually the females get the bad rap and get moved on and out of the picture. Oh, it's disappeared.
I'm muting myself. Okay. Yes. Yes, the myths. I recommend this book too. I've been putting the titles of books that are either being read from or at least one book by the author in. And I put in Mary Beth Stange's book, Woman the Hunter. I highly recommend it. Every other chapter is a description of her hunting something, a deer or whatever. And you know, she's like, well, why should you only get your meat in the supermarket? But anyway, the next person up is Pauline Kirk. And Pauline is one of the first people that Alan and I met in York when we came here in 2005. And I think Pauline had gotten here just about then. And now she's headed out of town already. She's moved on. Pauline has lived in about 10 different, you know, places and 3 continents or something. So Pauline Kirk, please, and you're my co-conspirator in creating this event. So Pauline, please introduce yourself and read a couple of bits.
Right, 2 novels have been published which could class as dystopian. I'm nervous of that word because it suggests pessimism and, oh, we're all going to die. Whereas in fact, in both books, I've tried to show through a strong central female character what women can do and how they can fight back, even if it's, as in The Keepers, it's women with children who fight back, because as one says, who would suspect a woman with pushing a toddler and walking a dog? You are almost immune to being suspected because you're a nothing, you're a nobody. And so it is actually the women's movement in The Keepers who overthrow the Keepers. And I don't want to be seen as unduly pessimistic, but at the same time, I have a nasty feeling that both books, which were written a while ago, The Keepers was written 20 odd years ago, more than that, have proved prophetic. And I didn't want to be prophetic. The Keepers envisages a situation where you've had climate change and produced disaster, and the Keepers have stepped forward and saved the country, but they themselves are, shall we say, benevolent despots. If you do what they want, you're fine. But that means you can't think for yourself, the kind of things you've been talking about. Thought I'd read you a bit from chapter 2. The central character is Esther, who's a member of this resistance group. And she is walking to go and visit another resistance cell, which is actually amongst the undesirable people. So all the people who are pushed out from society are beginning to join together. In the shelter of the woods, it was almost warm, the first hint of summer. None of the trees were over 40 years old, having been planted after the great storms when the winds blew across the devastated land and whipped the soil from the hills to deposit it as silt in the rivers. Yet already many of the oaks and birch were so tall that the dwellings seemed to be sinking in a sea of brown. At the time, people had thought it was madness spending scarce resources on planting trees, but the Keepers had known what they were doing. Every year, the winds were a little less strong, the rainfall figures a little higher. The Keepers had known what they were doing about other things too, Esther admitted ruthfully. Though she hated what their regime had become, she had to accept that they had been the saviors of their country. They'd kept their knowledge from being lost all through the Troubles and the 7 years of civil war that had followed them. It must have been a hard struggle to preserve their skills even before then, when most people scorned learning and science and cared only for an easy life. Without the Keepers, no one would have known how to rebuild a nation that had been determined to tear itself apart. Yet the woods were an apt symbol for their knowledge. An effective shelter, the trees provided warmth and security, but they were dark and tangled, easy to get lost in if you left the permitted paths. As she approached the settlement, Esther began to feel nervous. For the past 2 weeks, her visits had been routine, but there was always the chance that today would break the pattern. She must prepare herself. Fox House Settlement was given over entirely to waste products and waste people. It owed its existence solely to the canyon and the refuse dumped there illegally when the city was still a collection of temporary domes. With their usual wisdom, the Keepers had seen that an increasingly unpleasant situation could be used to their advantage. Until disposal machinery could be rebuilt, the new city was in danger of drowning in its own garbage. It was also becoming an unwilling host to large numbers of refugees who would not or could not work. Used to an easy life before the war, they resented the sacrifices being asked of them by their new rulers, or simply had no useful skills to offer. Decent, hard-working citizens were beginning to turn on them. All right, the authorities suggested, let such undesirables be driven out onto the outer edge of the city. The canyon was a useless gash through the surrounding hills. Let the useless and lazy have it as their segment of the city. There they could sort out the city's waste and keep or sell whatever they found of value. If they did not even have the energy to do that, then they could starve, out of sight of decent folk and without being a drain on the state. The woman at the first gate knew Esther and nodded as she went through. The second guard was new, however, and insisted on checking Esther's papers. Registered volunteer, eh? He asked suspiciously. Esther smiled patiently. You seriously want to go down there? Nodding his head, the guard indicated the canyon. And if I tell you that the country that that's written about is England in just about 100 years' time, and I think some of what I was putting in the future there is now happening in the present. And the second novel, which had already been written, but sort of pushed in a drawer, and Stairwell encouraged me to get out again, was Border 7. And they've reissued The Keepers, which is what I've read from it, but it was published originally by Century. And this is from Border 7. And I'm aware that this could be a conversation on a bus at present about a certain gentleman known as Bojo. All three refuge travellers paused on the safe side of the gates, gathering strength. "It doesn't look any better," one of the sales reps remarked. "No," his companion agreed. "Apparently there were riots on a couple of lines yesterday." "Not again," Jude commented. "The new order isn't going down well." "Oh," Jude asked. "I thought it went through Parliament without opposition. We have to save power somehow." They began to walk through the gates, sticking close. "So I heard," the younger man agreed. "Still, what this Parliament agrees and what the people will support are two different things. No one's going to welcome giving up the right to travel where they want, when they want. It's one of the basic human freedoms. Don't get me wrong," he added hastily. "The exclusion order was much needed. I mean, just look at this lot, and everyone with a permit, even under the new legislation. There are just too many people trying to move about, and too little transport or power to take them." "A year or two and they'll get used to it," the older man agreed. "When the personal transportation bill was passed, there was no end of trouble. I was serving in North One then, and there were riots every day. It's amazing how reluctant people are to stay in one place. It was just the same when they banned the automobile." By now they'd reached the City-Link deck. Though their travel passes gave them access to the reserved area, the 5 minutes wait for the next capsule was uncomfortable. The seats had been vandalized, and in the stifling heat, standing was tiring. The capsule came at last, and Jude joined the 2 men at the rear in the first-class accommodation. The ordinary travellers seemed to watch their arrival with more than usual resentment. There were more guards around too, not just on the platform, but riding on the transporter. Jude sighed. She did not like feeling she was one of a privileged few, but at least she was safe while she was in uniform. Secure City Incorporated had the power to protect its members. The 2 sales representatives parted company with her at the central station. There was an elite express link to London once a day. Jude decided to take that rather than risk travelling to Mid-2 by normal public transport. She spent the 2 hours wait playing reality games in the first-class lounge, watching the latest news. There was no reference to any riots. Indeed, the private transportation order was claimed to be universally welcomed, a long overdue measure to save power. Without it, there would be more and longer power cuts, and everyone would suffer. A couple of tame citizens were paraded to recommend the government's far-sighted action. "We can all travel if we need to," the woman said, smiling to camera. "Passes will be easy to obtain, and all we have to provide is proof that our journey is necessary and produce our identity and medical cards. Oh, and you also need a letter from your employer giving permission." The woman near Jude snorted loudly. "What if you don't have an employer?" she asked. "Or your boss doesn't feel like giving you a letter?" Other travellers murmured agreement. "First it was medical sanctions," one remarked, "to prevent the transmission of infection. Now it's virtually anything you can think of. If this goes on much longer, we can forget about visiting dear old Ma and Pa." Their comments surprised Jude. It was not often one heard such outright criticism of the government, and certainly not in a first-class lounge. Do you know how long I had to wait for a pass? The woman asked. 4 hours. Another woman laughed scornfully. I bet our elected members aren't waiting 4 hours, she retorted. Or refuge officials either. The last comment was obviously intended for Jude's hearing, but she pretended to be too absorbed in her luggage to notice. And in the book, Jude moves from being a privileged member of a secure corporation that protects its members so long as they sign away their lives with a full life contract. And she moves from that to being a rebel. And the book traces as she moves to be a rebel and what she ultimately achieves.
I love this book. I really do. Yes, Susie, Susie Aspel, you had your hand up, and then Susie. So Susie and Susie A, then Susie W. Oh, still alphabetical. I'm feeling so pleased. Yes, Susie.
Mine was accidental, Rose.
Oh, well, you're on the spot now, lady. No, okay, that's all right. All right.
I really wanted to know the name of the book. I couldn't quite
that's the
hear
one
it.
I haven't put in yet. Yes, that's true. I'll put that in right now.
Thank you.
I'll turn my I'll put on mute so I don't you don't hear the tapping. And then Susie Williamson.
I read Border 7, absolutely love Border 7. It's such a great book. And I was just thinking a few things when you were reading, Pauline, because about the importance of fiction. So yeah, it's very accurate and quite prophetic. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. I think sometimes in the real world we have this disconnect with what's actually happening. Really bad stuff can be happening, and yet people just live life as though everything's fine, and there's a complete disconnect. And actually when you then get fictional stories, basically that's exactly what is happening here, and maybe it can help to join some dots for people and get rid of this disconnect. There is the sort of this tyranny of government. You cannot question the government, that kind of dictatorship type thing. And just thinking about what's going on in the UK at the moment with our right to protest. We are having our right to protest attacked at the highest level. It's completely terrifying. I find it completely terrifying. Without a right to protest, we are completely and utterly defenseless to affect any change whatsoever. As women, as refugees, in terms of racism, homophobia, anything, animal rights, climate change. I mean, in terms of climate change, climate activists are the people putting global warming and climate change on the agenda all the time, pressing politicians at summits like COP all the time. And without that, we are fairly screwed. Just thinking back to 2015 and the Paris Agreement, no pledges were met. You know, we were supposed to be looking at a temperature rise of less than 1.5 degrees. And 6 years later at COP, we're nowhere near that. Nowhere near that. And the best that they can come up with, well, we'll try and get some better pledges going this year. So it's completely on climate activists and all of us holding our voices, standing up to account for this, to press politicians to keep going with this, because we're going to burn, the planet's going to burn. And where are the climate activists? A lot of them are sat in prison because they've been arrested for demonstrating to save the planet. I mean, it's an absolute ball ache, completely. So I was thinking about that, and also just reference to Bodge Job Bojo Clown. What is our threshold? I mean, just in terms of what that man gets away with, and everyone just seems to think it's, you know, not everybody, obviously, but you know, the public voted him in. What is our threshold? And then thinking about COVID and thinking about climate change and all the rest of it. What is our threshold? How many deaths are too many? How much suffering is too much? What is the value of human life? And I know that these are questions that you ask in your book. And there is that disconnect. You know, when are people going to have any kind of ounce of human decency and empathy to say, that's too much, that's too many? What are we going to do? When are we going to actually stand up? So I was just, you know, I've heard you say something about Border 7 before, about, you know, whether it's bleak or whether it's prophetic. And I actually think they're really important stories. Octavia Butler's another author that I really enjoy her work.
Oh, yes.
I read Seed and that series, and talk about prophetic. It was frightening, especially with Donald Trump. I mean, if she hadn't have seen the future and she wasn't a true seer, I mean, I was almost suspecting she must be, because it was just ridiculously close to everything that's actually taken place. But I think it's so powerful when really people just sleepwalk through life and just seem to keep their head in the sand and have this disconnect. And I think fiction is really important to be telling these stories.
Thank you. Yes, I feel that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. I see hands and hands. I see Eliza and then Lydia. And if someone else's hand went up and came back down, I apologize. Put it back up again. So Eliza and then Lydia. No, actually, I'm going to hear. Actually, let's hear from Lydia first. I think I haven't heard. I'm going to hear from Lydia and then Eliza. I'm going to be real mean.
Cool, thanks, Rose. It's actually a question, Pauline. I'm just wondering that, you know, the stories. I've been having a cheeky look at the website and just starting to really sort of delve into it a little bit. What was your inspiration for each of those books that you've read from? I'm just really interested to know.
Weirdly, The Keepers, the first inspiration for that was being in the dentist chair.
Okay.
It starts actually with the central character Esther undergoing a mind check, which is done, you know, regularly, and you have to have a clean bill of health with the mind check. Mm-hmm. And it was the sense of helplessness that you have when you're lying back in a dentist chair and you open your mouth and you agree, and you know things happen to you. And in The Border 7, there's also a medical sequence. And I think women, particularly, their bodies are not their own in a sense. And, you know, having a male medical examination, all this sort of thing, that fed into my original inspiration, which got me then thinking a lot about the position of women and the way in which they have to rebel against this sort of oppression, whether it's a gentle repression or a severe repression, because otherwise they go under all the while. And so that was my original inspiration. But it was also just looking at England particularly and saying, where are we heading? What if? And once you start asking what if, you only have to take something one stage further and you're into dystopian fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these conversations are reminding me of, has anyone read the sort of first two in the trilogy by, is it Giovanna Fletcher and Tom Fletcher? So I think that the first one's Eve of Man and second is The Evolution. They're young adult dystopian novels, but that's basically based around the idea that something happens that means every baby that is born is a boy. And then for the Rose's face, what a terrible world, I know. So then, but then Eve is born and she's the first girl to be born in so many years, and effectively she is the future of humanity. And she is very much protected because she's in like this high tide that protect her because she is the future of humanity. But through that, she is also completely trapped. And as soon as she wants to rebel against that, it's sort of similar to what we were saying earlier. She has all the power because she is the future of humanity. They need to protect her and she can't do anything wrong over theirs. They're all in chaos. But that power almost sort of entraps her as well, as what we were saying earlier after you read, Kenzie. And yeah, I just think these ideas are so interesting in terms of how far will people go in certain situations. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Right. And Eliza, did you want to
just add a couple of little bits, and yeah, how far will people go? And exactly as Susie also said, and I do think fiction can give join some of the dots, and that Pauline's readings were an example of that, and brilliantly caught the everydayness of the whole thing. And I love Border 7 too. And also I wanted to say Jenny Offel's novel Weather gives a sense of that. We can walk into it blindly and, and keep thinking, well, should I do something about this? And then eventually it's upon you, and then it's too late, kind of thing. And but also earlier, it was, the name isn't here on my the top thing, but the story about the woman in the tower. Who was it who wrote that? Sorry, what's the name of the Kenzie, sorry. Kenzie. Yes, Kenzie mentioned about the female can be all sorts of things, and you talked about the females being treated differently if they kill or whatever. And I think Appleseed, which is a fantastic climate change novel, which is incredible and has amazing images and does the stuff that you want a novel to do in order to maybe say, well, how much can we take? And it goes back and it goes right 1,000 years forward, and it's terrifying. It has an incredible image for 1,000 years forward, but it is a female who actually eventually, her corporation geoengineers through total and utter frustration with the doing nothing of governments to do with climate change. She thinks, I wanted to discuss this geoengineering project with them. Nobody's listening. My corporation will do it. But she becomes corrupted by the power of carrying out her project. And she is the one who eventually makes the decision, which is actually going to lead back to, well, I won't say, but the most extreme dystopian Earth. And it's one that had existed many, many millions of years before in that kind of geological time. But we'd gone back to it in a whisper because of the geoengineering that goes on, and it is a female who who brings us to it, because the many voices weren't listened to, and those who are protesting about climate change weren't listened to, and all the indigenous voices and the voices of the world, which is what Susie was saying earlier as well. So just to finish off, I'm really kind of saying, yes, everybody's made brilliant points, and that was it. That was what I was going to say.
Thank you, Eliza. I think this has been a really good discussion. Maysoon, I'm so glad you've joined us. I'm recording it so I can send it to you later if you did want to hear it. It's been a lovely discussion with it's been readings punctuated by discussion, and it's really been really a lot of really good. Pauline and I had been hoping to make it not so grim, but I think that ship sailed. I think, you're looking at the news and you're like, yeah. Right, so the final reader for this session, and then we're still going to do some discussions at the end, but the final reader is Susie, who has been patient. Thank you very much, Susie. And we've brought out 2 books of your trilogy now, and I think we sold both at a little book festival we went to, and these are really amazing books, and I love the recent review of The Warder, and Ursula Le Guin. That was a really nice comparison, and it was really good. So I love your writing, and Susie, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It was so nice to be compared to Ursula Le Guin. My God. I'm going to read from my book, Return of the Mantra. This is a Stairwell book, and this is more fantasy, really. It has themes of climate change. And I was inspired to write it after having lived in the Sudan in North Africa, a country no stranger to the impacts of climate change, with drought and desertification and food poverty, people displacement. And so the world in the book is a land of contrasts, inspired by the Sudanese deserts and also landscapes in South Africa, where I also lived. And the main character is a young woman called Sunny, and she's brought up in a desert town ruled by a tyrant leader. And all she's known is desert and a drought that's lasted for decades. and she's been raised to believe in the old ways of the mantra, which has a kind of mythology about the cause of the drought. So this is kind of her journey of self-discovery and her own identity and a sort of fight for the natural world. She believes that the resistance of old are dead and that there is nothing beyond desert, until she discovers a hidden place where nature's clinging on. And so I'm good. And just to say as well that she has a companion, a young boy called Wanda, and she meets a man called Juna, who turns out to be an ally. So I've gone for a really positive extract. This is an extract where she first sees Forest. Yeah, lighten the mood. Heading southwest across the plains, up ahead the ground appeared to fall away. As we approached, a valley was slowly revealed, filled with a vast canopy of trees. I stared in awe and said, I could never have imagined so many trees. The forest used to spread all the way up this slope, Juna said, leading the way down the embankment. But over time it died back. What's left still survives because of the people working it. They plant trees, feed wildlife, even spread a flower's seed. The elders say the rains used to last half a year or more. Now we're lucky if they last a month. Still magical to my eyes, I said, but surely there's hope. That's what the elders say. They pray for the mantra's return to restore the balance of nature. But I think the world's just becoming more imbalanced. Even in the forest, younger generations think the elders' beliefs are just superstition. Juna's cynicism was not entirely unexpected in light of the detached life he led, but it was the first time I had heard him allude to discord among the wider community. Despite his misgivings, for me, entering the forest was like stepping into another realm. The light, the air, the smells combined to create a truly enchanting ambience. Green moss covered the ground like a blanket, vines wove patterns around trees, and curious sounds filled the air. Leaves rustling, branches swaying, and chirping and warbling I could only imagine came from birds. Further along the path, clouds of tiny flies swarmed around our heads. Wanda and I were soon scratching furiously while Juna appeared immune and oblivious to our discomfort. We're being bitten, I said. Juna stopped, looked up at Wanda and then at me. I didn't think, he said, veering off the path and searching the undergrowth. They never seemed to bother me. He returned with a bunch of swollen grass stems. Aloe grass, I said, taking the stems and snapping some in half. Seeing Juna gently raise his eyebrows, I added, my mother knew herbal lore. I smeared sap on my face, handing a stem for Wanda to do the same. Slowly the irritation cooled. There was so much to see. Everything seemed to be moving. Colourful butterflies, horned lizards, flying green beetles, stick insects. When we came across a troop of small brown monkeys, looking down at us from the trees, I stopped and clasped my hands to my cheeks. Long-toed monkeys, Juna said. The only monkey left. All other species have died out. Why? They relied on fruit, he said, and when their food source died out, they starved. So what do these monkeys eat? I asked. Red ants. He pointed to the monkey closest to us. Looking at its foot gripping the tree, I saw one toe curiously long. Juna said, he uses that toe like a hook to dig ants out of nests in tree hollows. Juna's knowledge was infinite, from territorial turnbills to the courtship display of hook-nosed bats. When finally he went quiet, I saw we were approaching a clearing, a village of round mud huts. It was a community bigger and more organised than I had expected. The air smelt strongly of bonfires and the sharp tang of soaking goat skins. Chickens roamed among gardens of sugarcane and beans. People were sat spinning thread, milking goats and tending crops. A young girl was the first to see us, a stick of sugarcane hanging from her mouth. "Ma," she yelled, running to a woman sat milking a goat. More faces looked up, suspicious. I took Juna's lead, lowering my eyes to avoid the glances as we entered the village. So yeah, I went for a positive, a positive extract, because for a lot of the book, I mean, this is a very patriarchal landscape, and for a lot of the book, she's brought up and raised in the desert, and there's a tyranny, there's a tyrant ruler, and like all good patriarchal systems, women and girls don't come off too well, and so she has quite a big story arc, really, in terms of her own personal experiences. But there are some really nice bits that really lighten it up. So, so I thought I'd choose one of those.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really like your books are about the natural world being subdued just for riches and for mining specifically. And that is what's going on in many parts of the world, and or cutting the trees down just to grow things foolishly for a season or two. And there is a sense of hope in it, which is really nice. And even in the second book, which has some quite powerful story arcs as well, there is a sense of hope. And I'm really glad, actually, it turned out well that you're the last reader here, because as I said, Pauline and I had kind of wanted to have all of us discuss ways to what we can do next. And sometimes I think we feel as if we can't do much, but I'm always cold, and I'm wearing more because I really do like this idea of even just 1 degree on the thermostat lower in every house. Let's just pretend everybody's doing it, is that much less gas and oil that we're using, especially since so much of it is from Putin, who is basically just he's basically just got a big gas station. He's got a big petrol station, and that's the way he's made his money. And so, yeah, I'm glad that you had that kind of hopeful thing, and it is hopeful. And I'm hoping that we will get there. I think we won't. I don't know. Let me think. Possibly Lydia will still be around, and Kenzie, when there's some positive things that happen. And Susie, you'll be a matriarch, darling. You'll be an ancient. You'll be the great grandmother of the village, Susan, telling what had happened.
Really old and small by then.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're looking 50 years from now, kiddo. It'll go up, and then it might get better. I don't know, and may soon, maybe. Let's hope. But sometimes I'm not unhappy to be 61, because I'm like, it's going to get really shit in about 30 years. But I am glad about the positive. I think the positive things we can do are that little bit less. And some of the chat we were talking about, if you can't work, when Lydia was talking about working, and Kenzie had said, what if you have a chronic illness? And I said, yes, I'm secretly disabled, and other people in this room are just not working for various reasons of physical impairment or what have you. And you don't have the worth, but then you don't necessarily have the power to change things. But what we can do are the little things, and it is using just a tiny bit less of gas and oil, and it is that little tiny bit more of active travel if one can, and it is protesting if one can. I'm now getting my hands tied by Priti Patel, because if she takes away my UK citizenship, my daughter will be here and I'll be thrown back out, because that's what one of the tools in the tool chest for the police bill is, that if you protest, you can actually lose your citizenship. It's not just 51 weeks in jail, which is a big enough thing, and you'll lose where you live and your stuff if you're not back at your house eventually. But I'd just be flicked out of here, like wiped off the map. And that's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to raise protest. And in America, laws went through to allow cars and trucks to hit and possibly kill protesters. It's not against the law to run down a protester in some US states. There's also the stand your ground law. You can shoot anyone if you feel threatened, even if you're the one who's been the instigator. So there are ways to protest, but there are limits at the moment. So I guess those who can risk being, that don't have another citizenship to be thrown back into, really have to protest if they can. I think that's what we really have to do.
Can I say?
I'd love to hear it, May.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
Sometimes, you end up being in a bubble, and I think to myself, why are more people not on the streets screaming about this? I mean, let's talk about that issue about, going back to another country. I mean, I was born and raised here. I feel British. Well, I say I'm British, but I mean, Pretty's trying to take that away, isn't she? If you hold heritage to another country, then, off you go back. And I think I know that it was recently defeated in the House of Lords, but it's still up there for debate. And I just think, why are people not going nuts? I mean, that's what a protest is for. But anyway, maybe it's just me.
No, that's just it. This is what we've been talking about. Yes, exactly. There's a complacency. People are waiting for magic science to magically cure all of climate change. Meanwhile, the Amazon is arguably heading toward a tipping point. And so, I think people are. I think it's up there with smoking, because you don't get cancer the day you start smoking. You think, whatever, and so since climate change is working relatively slowly, sort of, unless you're in the tundra or you're living on the shore and Bangladesh is going to drown. So I think that's one of the reasons. Yes, Kenzie, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add in as well, it's so interesting, I think, especially with climate change, seeing a lot of the onus put on personal responsibility. And I think it's almost smoke and mirrors as well, because of course, when we're looking again at those kind of companies, the top 1% of people causing most of it, and I think it's really interesting seeing kind of restaurants, for instance, saying, oh, we're not going to give plastic straws out anymore. And that,
right.
That's a great thing in some ways, but it's not tackling the problem, and I think it's that let's look like we're doing something. Let's, look as if we're making a difference. And it equates to a lot of other issues as well with racism. Everyone posted black squares on social media. Did they ever do anything to, challenge diversity in their workplaces? No, probably not. And I think it's that, let's look as if we're doing something, but not actually try and tackle those issues, because it's easier to just say, oh yeah, we care about this and we're doing something, but we're not really.
Exactly. Susie Aspel, did you have your hand up?
Again, it's my iPad doing things by itself.
Does the iPad have something to say? I know Pauline does, but does the iPad trying to interject into the conversation, which is a little bit creepy? You may find it walking around the house. Pauline, what did you want? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have perhaps a longer memory than most, being perhaps older than most of you. I do remember being heavily involved, but not physically, but mentally, with the campaign against apartheid, and knew people who had been banished from South Africa and who'd ended up in Australia and fled to there. And that was beaten ultimately by consumer pressure. And that is the one big thing we always have. Our money. And if we all don't buy something, then the company making it goes bust, or they have to listen to what we're saying. So if we are really careful about what businesses we're dealing with, what we buy from, what we support, then cumulatively, it has a huge impact. It did on South Africa. Individually, maybe not, but enough of us together, I think we can bring about change. And there's a lot of women in the world. It's sort of 50%-ish if we actually all got together. And it really, really sickens me that it's a woman who's bringing in these draconian laws. What the heck is she playing with?
Well, she even herself, someone said, well, your own parents came here. And she goes, I think I wouldn't have let them in.
No, talk about pulling the drawbridge up.
Yeah, she said that. Well, I don't know. Now that you mention it, I probably wouldn't let them in. Holy cow. Boris Johnson's managed to find the perfect fall person to do his dirty work.
Yeah.
Pretty disgusting person. I've heard a lot of myself talking. Does anybody want to say anything more? And I'm just because I want to hear other people. And
Well,
yes. Just pile in, all of you. Unmute yourself. Say things. I don't care. Eliza.
Oh, I was just going to say that one other thing that can be done is passing knowledge on. And Suzanne Simard's book, The Mother Tree, is absolutely incredible. And it's non-fiction. It's life writing, and it's science, and it's uses a lot of the techniques of fiction, and it is superb about her fight against the absolute stubborn truculence of the forestry people. She was brought up as a forester in a forester family in French Canada, in Colombia, in Canada, and she she learned about the forest by, as a child, she ate soil. She was, her parents said nothing or did nothing but worm her. She was wormed. She was frequently getting worms, but she could taste the fungus in the soil from an early age, and as opposed to from a later age, as the rest of us. Sorry. Anyway, she went into the forestry, and she found out that the foresters were not prepared to hear anything which was against clear cutting, against absolute decimation of any section that had been cut, for commerce, etc. Everything had to have Roundup, which is the pesticide, not the herbicide, and it had to be completely killed, and that would all drain down into the soil and kill everything underneath. And because she'd eaten this soil sandwich, literally with layers of fungus, each bit of soil that she tasted different. She loved it. She could tell the bitter and the sweet and the sour and all of this. And she thought, there's something down there. I know there's something down there. And she's the one who worked on this whole idea of the network of fungi. And there were little bits of, knowledge here and there, but the fungal hyphae that are tubes which connect, for example, the Douglas fir to the birch. And she found, yes, there was carbon moving, not just in one direction, but back again when each needed it at different parts of the season, nitrogen moving through, water being brought up. And it wasn't just moving back and forwards to their own DNA sharing trees, others of the same species, others of other species. The whole forest was damn well connected, and it is just an incredible book. And what she, towards the end, I mean, she's gone through cancer and everything else, and this all comes into it, and love and her brother dying and everything. And towards the end, she passes her knowledge on, which turns out to be the indigenous knowledge which was there anyway, and she passes that on as well, because it turns out they knew already all of these things that she'd researched over 40 years and goes on researching. And she passes it on to her kids, and they're involved now, and more people are involved because they're involved, and it's spread, and the foresters are dead in the water. Oops, sorry. And, so it can change through the generations, and also women. There's she goes through all the different women who've worked with her on her experiments. And it's absolutely fascinating what those women were doing up in the forest. Hard, really, really, hard work to do these experiments on the spot in the forest, digging, doing unbelievable. Bears are there the whole time. They're following them. The bears says that she just carries on. It doesn't matter if there's a family of bears there. The men disappear, by the way, during the bears. So anyway, I won't go on anymore. It's called Suzanne Simard.
Yeah, Eliza, put the type her name and the title into the chat. And you guys can all save your chat, because there's those little 3 dots next to the smiling face next to the chat, and you can save your chat. And Tanya, did you want to, because I'd seen your hand up before.
No, it was just, I want to say so many things, but I don't think we have the time. I just want to know one small thing that we can all, each of us can do, because I'm feeling a little bit helpless this end. I want to do something to improve things. I mean, just
less plastic, because plastic comes from petroleum. Less plastic. Turn the thermostat down and somehow use less plastic if you can.
Oh, yeah, everything's packaged in the stuff. Anyway, yes, I will. Yes. Yes. And the other question was, what reason, this is a separate issue, I'm sorry, what reason did Priti Patel give for, as it were, raising the drawbridge? How did she justify what she said?
She decides that the country is full, but you know, if you want to see a good poem, it's by Holly McNish, and it's called Mathematics. And it's all about how when people come into the country, they bring other things, you know, more schools need to be built, more teachers would be hired, more this, more that. And to an extent, you know, it's not the biggest country in the world, but on the other hand, a lot of the green countryside is actually waste. It actually is waste, and it's dead, and it's been you know, pesticided into just a green, you know, it's a corpse. And so there's ways of gardening more efficiently, and there's ways of housing people more efficiently. And we look at towers like Grenfell, which of course you can't jump out of and land on your feet, but actually housing that's only 2 or 3 stories high, terraced housing, has a bigger density than tall towers. You can fit more people, and then you can lean at your window and say, hey, to the kids going by, and you have more community if you've got, you know, terraced housing. And you have the footprint for these giant buildings is so huge that actually that's a neighborhood. Maysoon.
Thank you, Rose. Yeah, just, I mean, God, again, like Tanya said, there's so much to say, isn't there? I would say, as a woman who is, you know, has many labels, one of them being an ethnic minority, I think it's really fascinating how the most right-wing policies have been brought in by people like Priti Patel, who obviously, you know, hails from an ethnic minority background. But also, if you look at her and you look at Theresa May, I mean, in one sense, they champion their women, do the Tories, but they're so anti what I think being a woman is like. What I mean, for me, I mean, we'll have our own definitions, but I was just at another poetry event and talking about, in the Arabic language, the word for womb is raham, and raham means mercy, and actually it's about you know, generally with women we have this endless capacity to love and care about other people, but I think when you kind of go against your natural instinct, maybe it's me just philosophizing, but people like Theresa May and people like Priti Patel, who they're just, I mean, I can't champion them as, you know, in terms of their career, because what they've done in their career has been to decimate the lives of ordinary people. And this whole kind of, you know, what Tanya was saying, why did she bring this policy? Just because she can, because sometimes it's interesting, I think, the complexity of race and other labels that, I don't know to say it diplomatically, but you would have thought because you would experience difficulties and harshness in your life, it would make you more empathetic. I think it just makes people like that just stronger in their own beliefs, and they're more than happy to, you know, say, I'm all right, Jack. I mean, for me, the biggest horror is, you know, ethnic minorities who voted for Brexit. I mean, just the irony, but we won't go down that route. But, you know, it's just, there's a lot to say. Anyway.
Oh, no, that's good. And Susie Williamson.
Just to say that, you know, some women, and there are plenty of them, they support patriarchy. So I think it's a bit of a myth to suggest that patriarchy is only supported by men.
Oh no, there's a lot of women who voted for Trump.
Yeah.
To my horror, a lot of white women voted for Trump, like a lot. I just,
this is,
shockingly.
in terms of Priti Patel, I mean, that, the woman is absolutely vile to the nth degree. And what a shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's not on her own in terms of women, just eating their own and really, being down on women. And it's fairly unforgivable, really, because women are at the brunt of all of this, and with climate change and all of this. I mean, in terms of, I get what you were saying, Rose, about, protest if you can, because some people, it's becoming increasingly difficult to protest. I have people in my friendship group, and I get fairly stalled at the amount of apathy that's going on there, because they certainly could be protesting and don't, because they're okay. And it's like, well, you might be okay, but there's plenty of people who are not okay. And in a minute, who's to say you won't be okay? And then we won't have the right to protest for changing yourself.
I agree. The situation in the world at the minute, it's like, who's going to be next? It's like, you can't just say, oh, like the news in the past used to be, oh yes, that was happening at a distance and we'd go and help from afar, but we're all in very precarious situations now, aren't we? We never know. I agree with you.
No, and then they came for me, is that old poem. Susie Williamson, was your hand up?
Yes.
No, I need to put my hand down, but
see, that's what I mean. I think the hand stays up until it goes down again. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I was just going to, in terms of all of this with climate change, just as well, just sort of thinking about the relationship between climate change and the disasters of that and equality. And actually, we all need to be really eyes open to inequalities, because if we can address inequalities, racism, everything, misogyny, everything, then we go some way automatically to helping with climate change, because the people who are the most oppressed are getting the worst of this, in terms of, socially, economically oppressed, or where they are in the world. African countries, island nations are getting completely hammered by climate change, and I think, also in sort of pressing politicians, we're sitting in industrialized nations, we bear the historical responsibility for climate change. Africa and island nations do not. It's not on their shoulders, and that they're reaping the worst impact. So we need to also be pressing politicians to be subsidizing countries so that they can meet their targets and make the necessary changes and adaptations. And there's a massive reluctance for that. And there's I know African climate activist groups pressing politicians to subsidize African countries, but we could be doing that as well from within these nations. COVID-19 has just gone to show how much resources become suddenly available. Mobilization of trillions of dollars becomes suddenly available. Because somehow it's there and it can be magicked, so it's directly connected to political will. So I was just going to add that about equalities and being mindful of our own privileges as well, even though we also face stuff as women or with ethnicity or disability or various things, that we also have privilege depending on whereabouts in the world that we are. So.
Right. I think I'm going to be drawing the evening to a close. I really want to thank everyone for coming tonight and for putting in your tuppence or whatever, your 2 pennies worth, as Americans would say, your tuppence here. I think I'm an import. I'm an immigrant. But I really thank you. And I thank very much the readers for reading and sharing your words. And I really thank those who weren't here to read, but just here to join. And thank you very much, because that really helps make it all really good. And yes, fast fashion, thank you, Kenzie. Yes, that's a really big thing. Fast fashion accounts for more pollution than flying an airplane and all those cruise liners and all the rest of it. It is like huge.
What's fast fashion?
It's people that run out and buy something and then throw it away.
Primark. Right, okay.
Buying a shirt for only $4.99 and wearing it once and throwing it away. My daughter Emily and I have gone to concerts and we saw Lady Gaga, and the kids who went in were wearing blankets in the rain, and they threw the blankets on the ground and left them and went in. it's only tenner, I spent 10 pounds on 2 drinks, hey, but it was a physical object that was then on the ground, and it was made of plastic, and that enters and if you have plasticated clothes, and most of our clothes are, your best bet is maybe not to buy them and maybe not to wash them. If you have already bought them and you've already washed them, keep them, because you've probably already washed the plastics into the water that we've already been drinking. So there's that. So yeah, fast fashion, try not to. Don't buy crap. Go to charity shops. Buy ethical food. Buy food in season. If it's January and you're buying strawberries, that's bad. And a couple of years ago, Al and I just got into the habit of just saying we don't have tomatoes on our salads in the winter, and we just put other stuff in there that's crunchy, and just that. And that's, I think, is the key thing. Really, really key. I really want to thank everyone for joining me here tonight, joining Pauline and I here tonight, and go off and be inspired to do stuff. And
Rose, could I just a shameless plug? Well, firstly, just thank you so much to all of you. I've just come away completely inspired, and I've actually come away with so many ideas for my next book.
Yes.
So I was like, oh, this is brilliant. That was the answer I was looking for in terms of the way people can make change. But just a shameless plug, I've put a link in the chat. I'm actually hosting a book signing event of my books at Tang Hall Explore Library next Tuesday on the 15th.
Oh, is that also the Burnham Center? Is it also the Burnham?
Yes, at the Burnham
Center. I love that library. It's so cute.
Yes, I love it as well. I literally live just down the road as well, and I just popped in and asked, how do you support local authors, and they've just been absolutely fantastic. So I'd encourage all of you to sort of do the same if you're looking to put any events on or anything. They're really, really good.
What time are you doing this next Tuesday?
So I'll be around from 5 p.m. to 8, but I'm doing a reading and a bit of a talk around 6, so feel free to pop by any time. No pressure to buy. There'll be books to buy there, but it'd just be great to see you and chat, and there's going to be some dystopian refreshments.
Oh dear. Okay.
A
now
bit more gimmicky than actual, but yeah, if you're intrigued, please do come along. There's a link in the chat with some details, but that's my sales pitch over.
Thank you. No, that's what I'm glad that you've done that. I'm really glad that you've done that. And I'm going to go, and I'm going to see you all another time, hopefully. And thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Rose.
Rose.
Thank you all.
Well done.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks again.
Bye. Bye. Good to hear you, Maysoon.
Thank you. You too, Rose. I'll send you a WhatsApp.
Please do, darling. I miss you.
I miss you as well. Honestly, it's been far too long. I won't keep you, but I will send you a WhatsApp.
Good.
Lots of love. Take care.
Good to see you, Debbie. I'm so glad you joined us tonight, darling.
Okay.
I want to see that poem written down too, frankly. I mean, send it to me. Send me that poem written down.
Yeah, sure will if you want it. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll respond, Pauline. I haven't responded yet to your email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Pauline, we did a good night. Thank
We
you
did.
so much.
Yeah, it's worked.
It did.
I think people have enjoyed it.